Hi, hello. Welcome to Conversations Over. I'm Tyler,
And I'm Garrett.
and this week we're going to be having a conversation over video games. We're going to talk about what our favorites are, what our least favorites are. Maybe talk about what we want, like something we want a video game to be made based off of. Maybe some of our favorite nostalgic games, not necessarily for gameplay, but just for the memories related. So I'm going to start this off with a question. What is your favorite game of all time?
Oh God, you're hitting really hard out the bat. I don't know if I can tell you what my favorite game is so early. I think I'm gonna have to do some thinking on it. I'll be honest.
Do
There's
you want to
just too
circle
many
back to it?
contenders.
I mean, like it's the first question, and you're gonna want to like circle back already.
Yeah, I think that'll be the perfect way to end it. Is circle back on that first question you asked.
All right, bit of a
Unless
teaser
you have an
getting
answer.
into. I mean, we both know what my answer is. We can just bring it up later. It's fine.
Okay.
It's not gonna be a surprise to you. So what are some of your favorites? If you don't have a number one, you probably have at least a list going, right?
Yeah, there's quite a few games I'm fond of. Obviously, you can't mention video games to anyone who was born after the year 1995 and not have them bring up Minecraft, because obviously Minecraft is a work of art. There's some games we grew up with that I really enjoyed. Star Wars Battlefront 2, the original one, not the Xbox One and
Yeah.
PlayStation 4
Back
version.
on the PlayStation 2.
Back on PlayStation 2. Some retro games, Gauntlet, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, that I really enjoyed and really enjoy. Diablo.
Yeah, I feel like Diablo is definitely it's definitely up there. That's a fun one to play.
It's all about the memories that I've made along the way. I mean, you can't get past a game like Halo Reach without me, at least, admitting to have loved it dearly as a kid and still loving it today.
Yeah, I feel like while it's not on my list of favorite games, if we were doing a favorite Halos series, Reach would be on there for me.
Top 7.
I feel like it's top seven video games.
No, top 7 Halos.
Yeah, I mean there's Halo 1, 2, 3, 3 ODST. You got Wars. You got Wars 2, I think.
Yep.
There's another obscure one. And you got Reach. You got 5.
You got
and
Spartan
Infinite
Assault.
coming out soon. That was the other obscure one that I forgot. Yeah. I mean, is that all you had on your list?
I mean, just looking in front of me at the video games I have pulled up, like, I mean, there's games that have made a large impact on me. Dark Souls 2 to a much more limited extent, because, I mean, they fucked up a lot of stuff in that one, but it led to a good video game mentality, I think, on my part. Obviously, there was the get good movement in video games, and I think that that's led to a challenge degree we wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah, I feel like if ever there was a game I wish I was better at or spent more time playing, it would be Dark Souls. Not so much like Bloodborne. I'm not really into like the lore of Bloodborne as much as Dark Souls, but I never really gave it a shot because I was bad at it. And I figured I was bad at it, I wouldn't get good at it, so I just stopped playing.
Fair enough.
Which, I mean, that's a bad mentality to have, but I was much younger then.
You were.
I mean, if we're moving on to my list, I know you didn't ask, but I'm kind of eager to share, I guess.
Go ahead.
Some S tier games, in my opinion. Obviously, Minecraft. It's got to be up there. It revolutionized survival games, survival crafting games. I feel like it really brought them to the forefront. And it's so accessible and so moddable by the community. I feel like Forza is on there, specifically Forza Horizon as a series. I don't really have a preference. Obviously, the newer ones have the better graphics and the newer cars,
Of
so I
course.
feel like it'll just always be the newest one that's on my list. But it gives you a nice playground to have to go and drive and drift and race or whatever. Whereas like the actual Forza series, it's more structured, which has its ups and downs because obviously it actually teaches you quite a bit about the cars and like what different parts of the cars do, like when you're upgrading and tuning or whatever, which I think is really neat. Whereas if you had Need for Speed, it doesn't have that aspect of it. It doesn't really teach you much of anything.
Not at all.
But if you're playing Forza, it'll tell you like, oh, this is what adjusting this will do, and like if you change your gear ratios, here's how your car will respond. And I feel like that's a very cool side to have to it. And also the physics engine is much more realistic, especially in like the mainstream Forza, not necessarily the Horizon, because they want you to have more fun in Horizon. But you can really fine tune the physics to your liking, which is very very cool.
And even in
Um,
Horizon, you see that with its unrealistic physics, it still has the very gearhead tuning options and the customizations, the year difference in cars. The selection is insane.
yeah, just the sheer number of cars to choose from. It's got something for everyone. If you want to drive like a utility van or a pickup truck or a Maserati, right? It's hard to look at that. It's hard to like racing games and car games and not like Forza.
That's fair.
And then of course there's good old classic. If we end up talking about nostalgic games, this has got to be on the list. This is the first game I remember ever playing like a lot of would have to be Ty the Tiger.
What a great game, honestly.
Um, I feel like it's a pretty obscure reference, right? Like I feel like it wasn't a very mainstream game. So basically, you're a tiger, you're a Tasmanian tiger, and you have boomerangs because you're Australian, and you can get like different types of boomerangs, like multi rangs or like flamerangs, and it was a puzzle platformer, um, but it just had that nice fun little twist to it, and it was like it's one of the first games that I remember putting just hours and hours and hours into it.
And yet we never figured out what the ending was.
Yeah, I don't think I ever actually beat that game, which is a bad habit that I
I
have.
never got close to beating it.
But I feel like we were a little too young to actually understand like how to play the video game, and we just thought it was fun to play.
I will say, I don't know if it was the best made game when it comes down to it, because it was definitely hard to figure out what you were supposed to do. And I mean, I
Yeah,
ultimately never did.
I feel like that's really fair, but it just holds a special place in my heart. Also on my list would have to be Tony Hawk video games in
Oh,
general.
for sure. Underground
So
especially.
yeah, Tony Hawk Underground. I think that might actually be the first video game that I ever played. Used to stay up late and get in trouble for playing it. It was lots of fun.
PlayStation 2 days were definitely influential in what it comes to what I like in a video game, because obviously there was Tony Hawk Underground. And we grew up in a PlayStation family. We didn't really start getting Xboxes until late in the 360 days. And I can remember like some of all the video game memories I have, all the first at least, belong to PlayStation. First game I played was on a PlayStation 1. Um, the first M-rated game, I'm pretty sure that you played the same game, Without Warning.
Without Warning, it was a great
It was
game.
a PlayStation 2 game, and it does not live up to any sort of review, any examination. It falls apart pretty quickly. But I mean, as a child, it being my first M-rated game was quite the experience.
Yeah, I feel like this is a bit of a tangent to go off of, but I feel like Like your first M-rated game, your first R-rated movie, I feel like those just hold special places in everyone's hearts. Like I could tell you right now the first R-rated movie that I saw,
Could
right?
you?
It, yeah, I could. It's I Am Legend.
Is that R-rated?
Yeah,
That might be the first R-rated movie I've seen as well then.
especially to go and see it in theaters too.
Yeah, gosh. No spoilers, but that's an
If a
emotional
movie's
one.
been out for more than 10 years, it's not a spoiler.
Will Smith,
I
though.
firmly believe
What
that.
an actor.
I love Will Smith. I like his kids too. Jaden more than what's her name?
Willow? Willow hasn't been in the news much. Also, he's got a second son. I forget his name, but everyone
Oh
does.
yeah, the older one. Yeah, no
Trey?
thanks. He's not famous. It could be Trey. Without looking it up, I couldn't tell you. But for sure, just to get back on track of video games. Without Warning, it was not a good game. It was a fun game.
No, it's terrible.
I was not good at it. And I feel like it has a bit of a cult following to it. Like there are some people who are like, they're like, yeah, I remember that game. It was great. It was the best game ever played. I'm not one of those people.
I've never
I'm
met
sure
any
someone-
of those people.
There's got to be someone out there who their favorite game is Without Warning. I forget what you're like part of a small operations team, and you
Okay,
change.
essentially what happens in Without Warning is a terrorist attack. Hence the name Without Warning. And you're basically just a ragtag group of civilians who happen to be in the area. You have like a mall security cop who has nothing but a pistol. You have a former bomb defusal agent. It's quite the interesting cast of characters. But
There's also a sniper in there somewhere.
the trick is, as soon as you start to like one of them, you're forced to play as someone else.
Yeah, it was an interesting concept. I don't feel like it would fly today.
Not to mention the always running game clock that would eventually possibly stop you from beating the game if you didn't do well enough in the first portions.
Yeah, I don't think I was ever close to beating that.
I certainly
There was
didn't.
there was this one level where you were at like a power plant or like a water treatment facility, and you had to go around and defuse a bunch of these different bombs. You had to like find them all and defuse them all. That was the farthest I ever got.
Yeah, I think that was the farthest I made it as well.
I feel like we just played on the
Yeah, I
same save
distinctly
file,
remember
honestly.
one of us telling the other that they couldn't beat it, and then the other one trying and also not being able to beat it.
Yeah. It was certainly a game.
It was certainly a game, and for me, it's a very special game.
Yeah. I'll never forget killing all those suicide bombers and getting jump scared by them. So, let's talk about some of our least favorite games that we've played.
Gosh.
Ooh, actually, no. Let's go back to my favorites list real quick
Okay.
because I was just reminded of one because I've been watching lots of Legend of Korra lately. It's a game. It's an indie game. It's called Indivisible. I think you played it as well.
I did, yes.
That is by far one of my favorite games that I've ever played. It doesn't quite take the cake for number one, but it might be my number two game, honestly.
It's really fun. I feel like indie games don't get enough credit. I think they're definitely starting to get more credit. But a lot of people see indie game as sort of a crutch and a handicap on their ability to produce something that a big name would be able to do on a budget. But I think we're finally seeing with Kickstarter and GoFundMe, like, the ability of these indie designers to get their ideas out there and make really wonderful, really unique experiences instead of making, like Halo 7 or Call of Duty 98 or something.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that people see indie game and they're like, oh, it's not going to be that fun. But I feel like in the age of YouTube and just the internet in general, that's kind of gone away because there are lots of YouTubers out there who just strictly play indie games or play like indie horror games specifically. And so I feel like people are like, wow, these smaller groups, these smaller companies can actually produce a really good game.
which is wonderful to see.
Yeah.
Any other
I know
addendums, or are we getting on to worst games?
You know what? If I think of one, I'll just spit it out. But
Okay.
I can't at the moment I can't think of anything. Except of course my number one, which is staying hidden.
Of course. So, what makes a video game bad?
At first I thought that was a rhetorical question that you were going to answer yourself like a professor would, and then I realized this is a conversation,
This is a
and
conversation.
you're asking my opinion.
And I
To
would like
me,
you
what
to
makes a
answer
video
it.
game bad is definitely lack of structure, right? I feel like that's a big one. If you just feel like you're not going anywhere, or you feel like you're not being led in a certain direction, I feel like that would make a video game bad.
But at the same time, overleading makes a video game bad.
Yes, absolutely. Ooh, this has nothing to do with bad games. This is just another fun, like top video game on my favorites list. The newest God of War.
Oh yes, it is wonderful.
We can talk about that in a minute. Back to bad video games. Um, Pay to play mechanics, especially if there's an online aspect to it.
Awful.
Just the worst. And I'm looking at a specific company.
Are you?
Yeah, definitely.
I can't imagine what company that is.
It's 2 letters. That's the only hint I'll
I'm
give
sure
you.
you'll tell me about it.
I think you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone knows. They're getting better at it. Some of their newer stuff that they're releasing, they've strayed away from that aspect of it. Um, but just mentioning that one thing that I think can ruin a video game, I'll just go ahead and put one on my list. The new Star Wars Battlefront, like when it was remade or whatever. I feel like it could have been so good, and because of the fondness that I relate the name to, because of playing Battlefront 2 on the PlayStation, I personally got really excited for it, and then I played a few rounds of it, and the gameplay was okay, but it didn't have the 2 best game modes, of course being the hero fights, where you could play as like the Jedi and the Sith and like the big names.
Which they did
And
admittedly add later.
they did. Okay, I haven't played it since like the week it released almost. And of course Galactic Conquest.
Which was far and removed the greatest aspect of that and almost any video game I've played since.
Yeah, I feel like it's a part of like just it's not in any other game that I can think of.
There was an obscure, as obscure as it could be, Lord of the Rings video game that also released for PlayStation 2 that had similar player versus enemy AI mechanics and battlefield situations. It was essentially Battlefront, but for Lord of the Rings. So you could have your heroes, of course, or you could play as just an elf or a human. And
Right.
it was really fun, but I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I know exactly what game you're talking about. I don't think we owned that one. I think it was one of our friends.
Yeah, I think our older brother, the hidden brother of the podcast, one of his friends had it and brought it over a few times.
It was a fun game to play. I feel like Lord of the Rings has tons of video games, and they're all decently fun to play.
I would hesitate to make such a blanket statement.
The ones
Simply
that
knowing
I've
how many
played,
there are.
the ones that I've played, I've enjoyed. But I'm big into the fantasy genre, so I feel like
which
It's
is why
just,
your
it's my
number
cup
one
of
video
tea.
game is what it is.
Hey, no spoilers.
Just a hint. Just a hint. Not a spoiler. So back
I
to
feel like,
bad video games.
right as I was about to say before you rudely
I'm
interrupted
sorry.
me, I feel like it's hard to pinpoint from like a technical standpoint what makes a video game bad, right? Especially since neither of us have any game development skills or knowledge. It's hard to be like, oh well, when they do this, like, but I feel like when you play a bad video game, you know
You
it's a
know
bad
it,
video
yeah.
game. So do you have any games, like newer games that you've played that you've just been like, ew, and you just got rid of?
Haven't been many games that I've taken the initiative to either download or purchase and then realized were terrible. Just because the internet is what it is, it's pretty easy to get out into it and see if a game will be something you like or not. As a whole, I think I've kind of strayed away from sports video games as I've grown up because it started to feel more and more like a rinse and repeat process. And I think part of that is just not caring about the sports in the game.
Right.
We used to play Madden a lot. I think Madden I could still be into. I couldn't see myself purchasing it every year. I've never been that into basketball. I certainly didn't enjoy playing it on my Xbox. Besides sports video games, games that really feel like just money grabs, like you said. EA, the Battlefront sequels slash reboots, really struck a nerve with me. I tried playing both of them and got rid of them pretty soon. But other than that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I've installed and immediately deleted.
Yeah, as far as like Madden goes, to me that's one of the games that if I'm hanging out with a friend and they're like, "Hey, do you want to play Madden?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure." Like I don't follow football religiously, but I could still play it and have a good time with my
Yeah, it's
friends.
fun to play once or twice, every once in a while.
But it's definitely, like you said, not a game that I would go and buy like every year that it comes out because it's really just, it's kind of like Forza, right? Where it's the same game, just slightly different. Like the players on the teams are different, and they'll change aspects of like my career, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just change little bits of it to keep people coming back. And if that's your thing, cool. It's just personally not what I'm into. One game that I can think of that I would consider to be a bad game, that I would have considered to be a bad game when it first came out, is No Man's Sky.
Wow.
I feel like it definitely overpromised and underperformed, saying like it was going to be multiplayer and it just had all of these things lined up. And then when it first came out, none of it was true.
That's fair.
If I were to download it right now, because I don't have it on my Xbox anymore, but if I were to download it right now and play it, I know I would enjoy it because I've played it recently and I feel like it's gotten a lot better.
And in fact,
But it's
it
definitely,
just had a massive update not 2 days prior to us recording this podcast.
but it's definitely, it was definitely a game that I can look at and be like, yeah, it's a bad game.
While we're on the topic, I think you're absolutely right. I think No Man's Sky missed every mark that it set for itself on release date, which was 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago now. But at the same time, I have to commend them for not abandoning it. We saw, to go back to Battlefront, the first Battlefront remake, everyone absolutely hated, and instead of sticking with it and fixing it, EA decided, whatever, it's bad, we'll make a new one. And that's not something, gosh, I'm gonna actually look up No Man's Sky's developer because I want them to have this credit. 1 second.
Yeah, while you're looking that up, I'll just go on to say, Um, something that escaped my mind.
Hmm.
I don't know. I feel like there's lots of games that just feel like a carbon copy of another game. Um, like maybe not even just within the same series. Like I feel like some of the older Assassin's Creed games, as much as I love to play them, they weren't
They weren't
that
as new
different from
or
each
fresh
other.
as they could have been.
Right, and I feel like that kind of could turn me off of a game like Rise, Son of Empires or whatever, where you're a Roman gladiator in the fall of Rome. It was fun enough to play, but I just feel like the story wasn't there. It wasn't compelling.
No,
It
and it
didn't make me
quickly
want to
becomes a
play.
cinematic more than it is a game, I think.
Right. And I feel like that's not a bad thing to have if the game is good enough.
Right, there are several
But
games
for
that are very cinematic in nature. Life is Strange is very cinematic. Some other indie games in that
yeah,
vein. Man of Medan and its precursor. What is its precursor? Until Dawn, I think.
Until Dawn, and there's a new one that's coming out soon.
Are very cinematic, and that doesn't make for a bad game, but if there's no compelling plot, it certainly does. Just to get back to No Man's
Yeah,
Sky real quick, it's Hello Games. I want to really commend them for sticking with that process, sticking with the project and not letting it die. And the
yeah. I
president of
feel
the
like
company,
it
even
would have been so
after
easy.
the latest update came out, he said he was proud of finally living up to those expectations that they set. And I think that's really something to commend a sort of big name. Well, they're becoming a big name now, but they were an indie studio when they started. On really sticking to the community.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been so easy to be like, "Oh, you guys don't like the game? Okay, cool. We're done with it. We'll make something else." Right? But I feel like it was a real passion project, and they actually wanted to deliver on those promises that they made early on. And like you said, I would also commend them for just sticking with it through the whole thing.
So well done, No Man's Sky. You did it right.
Yeah, congrats. Big round of applause for you guys.
We won't clap because it's terrible for audio, but you guys can clap at home. And we would appreciate it if you did.
Yeah. To our 3 listeners, please
Please
clap.
clap.
Scare those around you. Um, so what are some concepts, or like maybe it's like a show or a book or something that you feel like should be a video game or could be a video game but it's not?
Um, that is a great question. I think for a lot of fans of fantasy and roleplay, the amount of Dungeons and Dragons that is not converted into something playable on a screen, um, or even a sort of service that would allow for you to not program but create in a digital world what happens in Dungeons and Dragons, I think could do very well. I think it's something I'd like to see personally. I understand that it's a big project, and we've seen people try it with moderate success.
Yeah, I feel like that would definitely be an interesting concept to have someone be able to kind of DM, right? And they have a range of things that they can choose from and design these dungeons, and then these players would use their characters and work their way through the dungeon. I feel like that could be a really cool game, but it would, to be able to do it correctly, would just be such a huge undertaking.
Certainly. What's strange is sort of the closest thing we've seen from a big name studio was Resident Evil, actually, when they briefly made that multiplayer sort of in between the remake of Resi 3 and Resi 4.
Oh yeah, I remember. I saw some people play that. I never played it for myself, but I
Which
see
is
what you're talking
interesting.
about.
What about you?
Yeah, but I feel like it's
What are you wanting to see become a video game?
so actually this is an interesting question for me to answer because two of my answers is actually happening, right? So Harry Potter is finally getting a fully fleshed like open world game called
Yes,
Hogwarts
congratulations
Legacy,
to Warner Bros. On
and
getting that finally.
I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I may not agree with what J.K. Rowling says
May
all the
not?
time. Okay, guys, I definitely don't. I support trans rights completely, and she was awful for saying those things. That being said, Harry Potter holds a special place in my life, and I'm a huge nerd for it.
And it holds a
And
special place in a lot of people's hearts.
right, and I feel like there's no shame in that. Like, right, just because the creator of something that you love came out and said something awful doesn't mean you have to hate that thing now. You can separate the two. So that was definitely on my list. I wanted to be able to be in that world and be like my own wizard. And that's happening. It's coming out next year. I think it's the potential release date. Another huge one is Avatar, and it's in the works. I
Is it
think
really?
I read somewhere that they're developing a video game right now. I don't have any like information on it, but just having a video game set in that world, like where you're the avatar, I feel like is really cool, and that's something that I've wanted ever since the first time I watched The Last Airbender, and especially now that I'm getting back into it. Like I've watched through The Last Airbender twice within the past year since I got it for Christmas. I watched through the whole thing twice, and now I'm starting my watch through for the first time actually of
The Legends of
Korra, because it's on Netflix and I'm just mooching off of my friend so I can watch it.
No shame in that.
So I honestly don't know if I have an ant because those two are like. Okay, here's one. I feel like there is a game in the world,
Certainly.
but it needs to be remade. Not the game. Like if this game never existed, I'd be a happier person for it. But Aragon.
Certainly.
The game itself wasn't that bad. It was fun to play, and there was this weird thing you could do where you like turned your swords into basically lightsabers, and you could just dominate.
My
right?
God, that game was so fun.
It was a fun game, but it was based more on the movie than it was the book,
Unfortunately.
and so the movie just wasn't great or good. I'll say it. The movie was not good. But I read through that entire series, and like I said, it's fantasy, so of course I was really into it. And I feel like there's not really a game that has you linked to a dragon.
Well, of course not, because that's not a concept that is common.
And I feel like it could be really cool if they put some time into it, especially like on these modern like engines. They could make a good game out of it.
Definitely they could. I think I might know, if not what my favorite video game is, at least what my favorite video game series is. Ooh, actually, it's hard to say because you know what? Let's take a brief detour. Let's talk
Okay.
about how you feel about console exclusive games.
Oh, like just the first one that I thought of, which is strange because we talked about Halo earlier, but the first one that popped into my mind was Spider-Man for
Which
the
is
PlayStation.
interesting
Is that what you
because we
mean?
also talked about God of War.
Which is also a PlayStation exclusive.
Yes.
But for some reason, just the Spider-Man Sony pairing, I feel like.
That could have its own episode entirely. Sony and Spider-Man.
I feel like it, from a business standpoint, having that exclusivity is kind of what draws people to those specific consoles. Like diehard God of War fans are going to stick to PlayStations because they know they'll always have that game to go and play. or like hardcore Halo fans, and they'll go the other direction.
Well, we can't even
And so I
say
feel
that
like,
now because Microsoft has agreed that from now on, Halo will also be on PC.
I guess that is correct. It's not technically an exclusive if it's on PC. But I feel like it's needed, but also it kind of sucks. Because if you're not in a position to buy both, it makes you choose.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing stopping someone from being a Halo fan and a God of War fan.
And in fact, I
And now,
enjoy both.
yeah, exactly. That's why I chose it, because I know personally I really enjoy both of them. So that's why it kind of sucks. But like at the same time, I get it.
Personally, I think in a field and a market dominated by AAA industry, Activision, Bungie, Bethesda, not
Ubisoft.
anymore, Ubisoft, EA. I think these people have no excuse to create a console exclusive. I think it makes a weird sort of gatekeeping of the console, which I don't appreciate. I
Yeah,
understand if you're a small indie studio, like back to No Man's Sky even. The initial launch date for PlayStation and PC was 2016, and then they eventually ported it out over to Xbox One in 2018. And I can see that the work of coding it specifically for the other console is a lot to ask of a small industry or a small studio, but as a whole, I think it's about time console exclusives died.
yeah, and I feel like what No Man's I call it Norman Sky, but
Mm.
that's nobody would understand that. I feel like what they did, where they launched it earlier for PlayStation and then they shifted. I feel like you could do that if Sony or Microsoft wanted to reach out and offered you a deal to be like, hey, let's make this Xbox exclusive for a year or whatever.
Right.
They would still have that draw, but they're also not forcing people to choose. And I feel like it's not as big a deal as it used to be, right? Because we're about to see the lowest release date price for a console that we've ever seen for like
Well,
a next
adjusting for
generation.
inflation and
Right? Yeah, of course, of course. And like especially for like a big name, right? The Xbox Series S, it was a starting price of 300, I think.
yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's not the lowest because that is the same price as the Switch, but for for everything it's toting for the next gen capability in quotations of 4K, I think, or 1080p, it might be in 60 FPS for what it's promising. That is unheard of.
But I feel like I would love to play Spider-Man on my Xbox.
Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you?
I'm super excited for God of War, Ragnarok. I'm super excited for Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Um, I'm actually more excited than I probably should be for Halo Infinite. I know they just pushed it back, but so with just what some of the things that they're promising, I'm really looking forward to it again. I think those are the only exclusives that I'm looking forward to.
And those are the only ones I can think of offhand that are important. Um, One thing, however, to mention is weirdly exclusive gifts and or incentives within games that are not exclusive. Um, we saw it with Destiny. After it became cross-platform, PlayStation players were receiving rewards, and we saw it recently with Marvel's Avengers. Spider-Man is a playable character only on PlayStation.
I have obviously I've not played the game. Well, I mean, it's not obvious, but I have not. You can take my word for it.
Mm-hmm.
I've not played the game yet, but I've heard nothing but awful things about it, which is really disappointing.
But you hear awful things about a lot of video games that I feel like you can only agree with the critic for so long. Especially, I think the appeal for me for Marvel's Avengers is local multiplayer. Like, the idea that for Christmas we can all sit around the TV and play a game together kind of outweighs whatever reviewer who played it by themselves had to say.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying I won't give it a shot. I'm just saying I've not heard great things about it, and that doesn't mean, one, they could obviously fix some of the issues that people have with it. Two, the people that have issues with it could just be like nitpicking, right? As long as it's a fun game to play, when it comes down to it, that's all that I really care about personally.
Which is why it's so hard for us to name bad games per se.
Right.
Because, I mean, you could point at a game and say, oh, the graphics were terrible, it controlled like a brick, and the concepts were outdated. And I would say, yes, that's all fun and fair, but the gun makes a pew-pew sound that I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate, honestly.
Okay, so
I
we've
forget
talked
what I was
a
gonna
little
say.
bit about favorite games. We've talked about what makes bad games, paywalls, exclusives. Do you want to touch a little bit more on nostalgic games before we get into favorites?
Yeah. So I was gonna ask you, what are some games that are just like hardcore nostalgia triggers for you? And then I was gonna ask you what some of your favorite series were.
So this is a great time for you to ask this question because Katie and I watched a little bit of Sonic last night. There was an outdoor movie we went to, and it just got me thinking about all these old video games we used to play and we used to have. And some of my earliest memories with our dad are definitely some of these video games, like Midway arcade collections, Gauntlet, for instance. I don't know why the sound, the door, the key, it holds a special place in my heart, and it always will. Arcade cabinets also. You'll remember this certainly. The sandwich
Ninja
shop
Turtle.
that we used to go to after getting Italian ice in Virginia. Do you know what arcade cabinet they had?
They had a Pac-Man arcade cabinet.
A Miss Pac-Man.
A Miss
arcade
Pac-Man.
cabinet.
Yeah.
I love that machine, and I
It was
always
the
will.
subway stop. It was good. It was like the sandwiches. There was good sandwiches.
They were good.
Just go there all the time after baseball. Oh, you're getting me kind of nostalgic right now, actually. It's weird for me. So obviously, like you said, the Midway arcade collection,
1 and 2.
1 and 2, those were super fun to play. And so I was never big into like cabinet gaming. We never really went to arcades, except for like Chuck E. Cheese, which doesn't really count.
Wait,
But
the most nostalgic video game of all time we played at Chuck E. Cheese. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle arcade
absolutely.
cabinet.
Yeah, if you check the audio, I mentioned that, like when you first said cabinet, that was the first one that I mentioned.
That was the most
I don't remember.
nostalgic game ever, and that was at Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I don't remember the gameplay very much. I just remember one time. I used to go there for my birthday a lot. One time I went and it was broken.
I was so sad.
And we couldn't play it. But like our coin got stuck when we went to try and play it, and it didn't accept it because it got jammed. And so our dad comes over and he does some finagling and he gets the coin out. And then another coin comes out, and then another coin, and another coin, and another coin, and we have like 10 coins that had been jammed into this machine.
Oh, it was more than 10. It was probably
okay,
20
well,
or 30 coins that just kind of rolled out of it.
And is that illegal? Kind of. I mean, like, probably, right?
But I would like to point out, as children, we didn't know any better. And as
Statute of
good
limitations is
citizens,
far
we
past it.
gave most of those tokens to a small boy who ran out and was very sad.
Yeah, we definitely shared, but also I'm not worried about like the illegality of it because statute of limitations is far gone for it. And as a lawyer, I know all about that.
Of course. Do you know how much jail time you can get for impersonating a federal officer, which would include district attorney?
All right. Well, I didn't say I was a district attorney. I said I was a lawyer.
Fair enough. Fair enough. As long as you
Touche.
don't practice, no one can come after you for that.
Yeah, they won't know if I passed the bar or not.
Mm-hmm.
As far like nostalgic games for me, it's one of the older Tomb Raider games. It's not so old that like everything was like polygonal, but it was close.
It was Xbox 360 Tomb Raider.
It was an early Xbox 360 Tomb Raider game, and for some reason, like I still love the Tomb Raider series. It's on my series list of favorites. But for some reason, that's just a super nostalgic game for me. I'm trying to think of.
It was Tomb Raider Anniversary.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Ugh, what a fun. And there were dinosaurs in it for no reason.
Also an M-rated game.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong Tomb Raider now. There was another one for 360 that was rated M. Anniversary, however, was only rated T.
Okay. Yeah. Our parents were pretty strict on playing M-rated games.
Which is why
look at us
Without Warning
now.
stands so far out in my memory.
Yeah, I don't know if our mom knew that we played that at the time.
Certainly not.
I mean, almost certainly not. I'm trying to think of some other
Classic nostalgia games for you?
Spider-Man Friend or Foe.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Oh, Game Boy games in general. So nostalgic.
It was the first
Teenage Mutant
racing
Ninja
game I
Turtles-
played.
Or not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teen Titans. Game Boy
Yes.
game. Obviously, the Pokemons. And just some obscure ones. There was the Hobbit one. That was so hard.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the games that I'm like, oh, that was such a hard game to play. If I played it now, I'd be like, oh, this is easy.
So
But just at the
to
time.
that idea, I actually found my Game Boy and the Hobbit cartridge a year or 2 years ago. It's still super hard.
It's still hard.
If anything, it's harder now that I don't remember the little bit that I learned as a kid.
Right.
So it does not get easier with time.
It doesn't get okay. I
Oh,
feel like there's some games like that.
Another super hard Game Boy game, the Van Helsing game. We never saw the movie,
Yes.
but we got the cartridge.
I've seen the remake of it.
Have you?
I have. There's someone famous that plays Van Helsing.
Hugh Jackman.
It is Hugh Jackman. Okay, I was gonna say that, but I was like, I don't know. I don't want to be incorrect. It's my biggest fear, as a lawyer, being wrong. I've got a nostalgic game for you, and I don't even know if I would count this as a video game. But I mean, we played it on the TV, so it has to be. But it's not a console game. It was independent, 100%. The Spider-Man plug and play.
Yeah, I absolutely knew you were gonna say the Spider-Man plug and play.
First of all, I love that game. Everything about it.
So good.
So much fun. There's just something so nostalgic about it, and like we could play it in the car too, because it just had that simple. Oh, I forget what the chords are called because I'm
AV
not an
chords?
electrical engineer. Well, I mean, of course it was an audio-visual chord, but there was a specific name for it with the colors.
I can
But-
tell you right now because I think my TV has a connection for it.
Mine does too, but I'd have to like stand up and look at it.
No, it just says AV on my TV.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just audio-visual, and that's not,
I know, but I think
mean,
that might be what they're classified as is AV cables. But certainly, I know what you're talking about. Other plug and plays that I remember,
the SpongeBob
um,
one.
the Nickelodeon one, it had that skateboarding show that I don't remember watching, but I remember playing the plug and play on it. And the SpongeBob one had the board game that we used to play all the time in the car. But my personal favorite was the Power Rangers plug and play. Specifically, it was Power Rangers PD.
Power Rangers will always have a special place in my heart, and I think it's because of that plug and play.
Absolutely, it is.
I still haven't seen the newest movie, and I'm kind of upset about it. But
It's very entertaining.
that's a whole.
I think it's on
whole other
Amazon
podcast. No way.
I believe that's where I watched it. It was on Amazon Prime.
I'll have to look into that. Maybe I'll get my friends to watch it with me.
Okay, so are you ready to finally reveal what your favorite
No,
game
I feel
is?
like we should do a little bit of a teaser for it and just talk about our favorite game series.
Okay. So my favorite game series, to date, I'm gonna play out a few hints, and I'm gonna see if you can guess what it is before
Okay.
I tell you. So, I'm a big fan of open world platformers. The series really hits the mark. It's only got 3 entries so far, but a 4th one is coming out soon. And I've always been a fan of superhero video games. So this it wins almost easily. I would say Halo, obviously, because it's so pinnacle in what our childhood was. Is a pretty close second still. But do you know what my favorite video game series is?
Said superhero, which makes me automatically think Spider-Man. And that kind of holds true if you think about The Amazing Spider-Man. It had 2 installments for video games back when it was Andrew Garfield, and then the newer one came out for the PS4, and Miles Morales is releasing soon. But I don't know if that's correct.
That is incorrect. Here's one more hint, and then I'll just tell you
Okay.
what it is.
Okay.
I didn't play the first one originally. I only got it when it re-released on the remaster for Xbox One. And I beat the 3rd installment in 2 days.
Oh, it's the Batman Arkham series.
It is the Batman Arkham series.
There's a new one coming out.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I thought of it when you mentioned Warner Bros. Finally putting out that Harry Potter game. I need you to watch this trailer because essentially I need you to play this game with me. So the Arkham series, if you don't know, spoilers ahead of course, starts with Arkham Asylum, goes into, I want to say it's Arkham City. I want to get the names right, so I'm going to triple check this. So I don't get the names.
Yeah, isn't it Asylum, City, and Origins?
Yes, so it goes from Asylum to City, and then Origins came out. Wow, it was, or no, not Origins. It's called Arkham Knight. See, I told you I didn't want to get the names wrong.
So wait, what is Arkham Origins? I swear that's a thing.
No, I think you're thinking of Wolverine Origins.
That's a shitty game. I'll say it.
No, Arkham Origins definitely exists.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. I'll look it up right now.
That is the name of the second one. So it's Arkham Asylum, Arkham Origins, and then Arkham Knight came out in 2015, and allegedly was the end of the series until recently they decided to make a 4th installment, which I think they've released a name for. I'm going to get it right because obviously we just got those wrong. It might not.
No, therein lies the rub.
Oh, there are 4 of them.
There are 4 of them. So we were correct. We missed. I guess I don't know. I don't know what
So
happened.
I've
There was a
played all
disconnect
4.
there.
I don't know
Yes.
what the problem. I think the problem is I had an Arkham Origins Cities like combined case. Maybe. I've certainly played them all, but the fifth one coming out was newly announced and has a wonderful trailer where you get to see that instead of focusing on Batman, four former Robins take the spotlight, and it is allegedly multiplayer.
Okay, so I mean, I assume we're gonna have Nightwing.
Yes.
Is Red Hood? Is that one of them?
Yes.
Um, those are the only two that I know of, honestly. I'm not big into like Robin is one of my favorite characters. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just not big into the DC side of things.
So you were correct. It is Nightwing and Red Hood. I believe Red Robin, who is Tim Drake grown up, and Batgirl, or Barbara Gordon,
That's in,
are the other playable characters as of now.
that's interesting. I
It is
definitely need
possible we'll see
to.
more added, much in the way we saw Marvel's Avengers kind of flesh out as it went through production. But I'm very excited for that. That might be my most anticipated game releasing soon.
I'll definitely need to look into that because that sounds pretty intriguing. And as far as most anticipated game, I feel like that's a question that we didn't really touch on that we could briefly. Um, I haven't been excited for video games in a minute. Like I haven't been like following them. There haven't been any like big name drops that I was like really pumped for. But now, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is definitely up on the list, as is God of War Ragnarok and Hogwarts Legacy. Those are all games that I'm highly anticipating. And if I had to pick one favorite game series, I definitely have two. And they're kind of similar. So for this one, right? It's open world, which I love. It just allows me to have some sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Parkour is a huge aspect in it, obviously, and so is stealth. Right? I feel like it's very obvious what this game is, just because you know me. If anyone else that didn't know me was trying to guess, I just described almost every game series. But it is, of course.
Is this pause for me to guess whether or not the answer is
like
Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, it's definitely Assassin's Creed. Do you know what the other one is, without any hints?
Your favorite game of all time?
No, not yet, not yet. My other favorite game series. I mention it all the time.
If it's not Forza, I don't know what it is.
Ooh, it is Tomb Raider.
Oh, I guess that doesn't count because you did mention that earlier.
Oh, yeah. Well. Then you should have guessed it. You have no reason not to.
That's a fair point, except you told me that you hadn't mentioned it as a series.
Alright, well, yeah, Tomb Raider and Assassin's Creed. Uncharted is also on the list.
Uncharted is a great series.
But to end this off, we're getting close to that time. What is just your favorite game of all time?
My favorite game of all time, I had to consider only single player experiences here. To this day, my favorite video game is Sony's PlayStation 4 Spider-Man.
That's a pretty solid answer. I feel like it's a super fun game to play. They really nailed the feeling of being Spider-Man.
Which is excellent. It's something no game... I mean, there's like PlayStation 1 games of Spider-Man that felt as close to that as you could get, and everyone was wanting for that to come back, and it finally has, and it's PlayStation 4. The storytelling is excellent. The world is fun to move around in. The character plays well. It's not too hard unless you want it to be.
I kind of want to play some some Modern Warfare after this. None of the Call of Duties made my top list, but they're all fun to play. As far as Call of Duty is concerned, the Modern Warfare series is my favorite, though. I was very excited when they released a new one, and I'm actually looking forward to Black Ops Cold War as well. I don't think I'll be finishing out this podcast on my own, but just in case I am, so it looks like I am going to finish this on my own, just as I was saying that a text came through. So, like he said, his favorite game of all time is Spider-Man, and we were talking about that. It's a fun game. That's all you need to know. It's really great. I highly recommend it. My favorite game of all time is Skyrim. Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I'm excited for Elder Scrolls 6, don't get me wrong. I'm kind of afraid it won't live up to the legacy that Skyrim is. Good old Todd Howard. He made as much money off it as he could, and he just sold it one last time for $7.5 billion. But I've made no less than 15 different characters on that game. I've put months worth of gameplay into it, at least. It's hard to check my exact stats because moving like consoles, I've played it on like 3 different Xbox 360s, and I've played it on my Xbox One, and so it's impossible to look at all my stats. But it's so replayable, and it's so fun, and especially now that you can put mods on it on console. It's endless amounts of fun, and obviously it's not a perfect game. It's actually a very broken game, but it's so fun. Just the vastness of the world, and just being able to just go and kill dragons whenever you want to. And the fact that you're always somehow the chosen one, no matter what you're doing. I feel like there's a flaw in that system, but with that being said, I mean, who doesn't want to be a master thief and a master assassin and the archmage and a werewolf? Never a vampire. Don't fall into that trap. But favorite game of all time, it's gotta be Skyrim. It always will be. I don't think anything can dethrone it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Elder Scrolls 6 just blows me away. But that being said, looks like I'm doing the outro by myself. I don't know if he's gonna put his own audio in there. We're like excommunicado right now. I don't have any idea what's going on his end. It was great talking to you guys. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you're entertained. Let us know in the comments what some of your favorite games are. Tell us how wrong we are about what games we enjoyed. And just really personally attack our opinions, because I feel like that's what's going to happen. We'll talk to you guys on the next podcast.